What's coming is hyperinflation followed by a deflationary depression. We're already in depression. It's just we're in the inflationary stage. And there's no turning back. There's no solution other than immediately purging the system. And that would work. It would be very painful. And it would last perhaps 5 years, or maybe a little longer. And that would be the end of it. But that's not their goal, solving the problem, helping the people. Their goal is we're a government. And they want to get rid of this individual sovereignty of nations. They want to get rid of 60 to 80% of the population in the world. So that's why they're doing what they're doing. And if you don't believe it, that's too bad. Because they've said it enough times. But so you can't be dumb enough not to listen.
For the longest time, if you ever made a comment about there being a conspiracy toward one world government, people looked at you and went, you're crazy. You're the right-wing conspiracy theorist. You don't know what you're talking about. Where's your tinfoil hat? And all this nonsense. And they did everything they could to discredit it. They kept the price of gold down by selling gold out of Fort Knox and basically suppressing the prices for years, draining Fort Knox to the point where the only thing that's left, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is probably tungsten bars with gold cladding. But the bottom line to this whole thing is that now it's getting to a point where you cannot miss the fact, if you have half a brain and half a pulse, that there's definitely a concerted effort going on to bring this country down, to repudiate the Constitution, what's left of it that hasn't already been put on hold. One of the things that fascinates me about this whole situation is how Americans sit still for it. Gold is not so much a hedge against inflation as it is a hedge against incompetence and deliberate greed on the part of governments and bankers. It's the way people protect their asset. And someone said, I saw this a few days ago, gold's in a bubble. Well, guess what? Gold's been in a bubble for 6,000 years. And what's held it in a bubble for 6,000 years is going to make sure that it goes on at least through this crisis, too. But you've got to realize, people, this is no joke. You don't honestly believe that your government was so stupid and so incompetent that this crisis came up on them a year ago and they didn't have a clue? I don't think so. Instead of thinking that they're inept, which is easy for us to do, and we'd like to think that because actually it would make them a little easier to handle, you got to realize that they're organized and orchestrated by a very, very diabolically genius bunch of people. Unfortunately, they overstepped their bounds and have pushed their ordered attempt into one world government into a state of chaos which even they can't control and which we're all going to suffer from. Any thoughts on that? Or am I totally off the wall and my tinfoil hat is on crooked or something?
None of the above. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And, it's been going on for a long time. I've been doing this for 50 years. And finally we're seeing some results. And most people don't have the guts to stay in it as long as I did. And anyway, it's worked out. And we're going to win.
Yeah, I've said that, I'm all well and good with people sleeping in America. I mean, liberty was supposed to allow us to do that. When it's time to wake people up, you don't go talking stuff like this. You hit them where it hurts. You hit them in the pocketbook. You run the unemployment up to 35 or 40%. You devalue their dollar. You make it so they can't pay for their homes. You face this gets their attention. And one of the things that's happening in the course of this takeover, and this is what I think the Illuminati very, very much miscalculated. They've spent 50 years educating several of our generations in liberal and progressive ways and the value of one world government and devaluing the Constitution to where my kids haven't even been taught it in school yet. They've had to learn it from me. But you know what? We're not going to go passively. And the reason we're not going to go passively is because liberty and freedom are genetic. in Americans. You may be able to train it out of us, but you can't get it out of our DNA. And one of these days we're going to wake up. And even with all the conversations about the value of socialism and Marxism, Bob, in the first half hour, I read a story about how the Chinese premier is carrying around copies of Adam Smith's books to read when he goes on trips. And they're moving toward capitalism in China while we're going back to Marxism and socialism. I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but has there ever been one example of where Marxism, socialism style of government has worked in a nation and allowed it to flourish? I don't think so. But you're the historian, you tell me.
No, it's never worked. And it will never work. And one of the reasons why is it's too binding, it's too totalitarian, all of them. A free and open economy that is protected by tariffs and that has a constitution that gives freedom to people is what we need. And we don't have that anymore. We had it once, and we gave it away to people who wanted to control us, wanted us to be their slaves. And so that's the juncture we're at now. And unfortunately, because people don't want to do what they're supposed to do in order to protect their rights in their country, it's probably going to end up in the streets. And it's a sad commentary on the intelligence of the people in our nation.
Well, patience and tolerance over time, when it's stretched beyond the point, it gives way to, I don't know quite what the word would be, but you have to find some sympathy, if not compassion, for this country. The one thing the one thing that occurs to me is that what I've noticed studying revolutions over the ages is that they're always very messy. And one of the reasons why they're messy is because they start too late. If people would start revolutions sooner, there wouldn't be such a mess to clean up, and it wouldn't be quite so terrible when it happens. But in a nation that still believes it operates under the rule of law, our options, where our rights of redress and the rest have just basically been swept out from under us, we're not left with a whole lot of choices. So we just sit, wait patiently, and watch and see what happens. I think it's very hard to effect that kind of change at this point, because until and unless government stands down, we're going down the path that we're going down. And you talked a little bit ago about how they could make the right moves if they wanted to right the economy, to raise the interest rates, go ahead and let the economy crash, let the too bigs to fail actually go ahead and fail, bring all the banks to the point where they had to mark to market instead of mark to fantasy, and we'd go through 4 or 5 years of depression and very serious times, and that would be it. But you and I know that this will never happen. It is politically the last thing in the world these people want to do, in part because they have a deliberate plan, but I think the other part of it is that they're scared to death. God help them if, in fact, they did try to do something like that. There'd be, we'd descend on Washington, and those that had invested in hemp futures would probably do very well. But in the meantime, we got to get by day to day, and I tell people, and I'm sure you've been telling people the same because I've heard you say it, prepare. Get food and water in a filter and the means to defend your family, and be prepared to hunker down for a period of time. That's where we're headed.
Without a question. And it's sad but true. And that's why you and I are on the radio, and that's why I do 30 hours of programming a week and publish 100 pages of very, very important information about what's going on in the world, and we are going to beat them, in spite of the public not catching on. But historically, that's not unusual. It's usual. Revolutions are led by 5% of the people. Our revolution was that way. And the Tories, they sat back and waited for the British to be successful. And the other people in America who weren't with the Tories said, well, we hope they're successful, but we don't want to get involved in that. We'll help if we can, but that's it. And so these people put their lives and their fortunes on the line and won. They won freedom for us, which has lasted since 1789. And we no longer have it. We allowed it to be stolen by international bankers, Wall Street, insurance companies, transnational conglomerates, and they have every intention of enslaving and burying us. And if you people don't smarten up out there, you're going to end up on the wrong end of the hook.